Do you ever wonder what the stars of Hollywood's golden age served during the holidays when the cameras stopped rolling? From Marilyn Monroe's handwritten stuffing recipe to Cary Grant's secret roast beef with Yorkshire pudding, these were the dishes that brought elegance down to earth. Today, we're lifting the silver lids on 20 secret holiday dishes the icons of old Hollywood couldn't live without. Marilyn Monroe, Thanksgiving stuffing. Marilyn Monroe may have been the world's biggest movie star, but in her own kitchen, she was surprisingly down to earth. In 2010, a handwritten recipe of hers surfaced from a box of keepsakes, a complex, old-fashioned stuffing that revealed how seriously she took food. It wasn't dainty or delicate, it was hearty, rustic, and deeply personal. Her notes called for giblets, liver, raisins, and even parsley, a mix more likely to come from a grandmother's kitchen than a Hollywood bungalow. Marilyn probably learned it during her years married to Joe DiMaggio, who loved traditional Italian-American flavors. It's said she made it herself, with help from her cook Lena, who often described Marilyn humming while she chopped vegetables, wearing one of Joe's old shirts for an apron. The mixture of bread, meat, and spices filled her Brentwood kitchen with a warmth that had nothing to do with fame. She once said, "I like food that takes time, the kind you have to pay attention to." That stuffing recipe wasn't just a meal. It was Marilyn trying to hold on to something real in a world that rarely was. Audrey Hepburn, spaghetti al pomodoro. When Audrey Hepburn wasn't dazzling audiences in breakfast at Tiffany's, she was happiest at her kitchen table in Switzerland, eating a simple bowl of spaghetti al pomodoro. According to her son, Luca Dotti's cookbook, Audrey at Home, it was her comfort dish, something she made often, especially during the holidays. She'd cook it herself, using fresh tomatoes, garlic, basil, and a swirl of olive oil, never rushing a thing. Audrey had no need for elaborate sauces or restaurant fare. Her love for simple food came from her childhood in war-torn Holland, when a ripe tomato was a luxury. Her housekeeper and friend, Alda, often helped her prepare meals, but Audrey always insisted on tasting the sauce herself, adjusting salt with the same precision she brought to her performances. "It's the one dish that makes me feel at home anywhere," she once told a friend. When she sat down with her family, the table wasn't glamorous, just candles, laughter, and that bright red sauce. For a woman who lived among diamonds and flashbulbs, her favorite meal was as humble as they come, and all the more beautiful for it. Clark Gable, chili con carne. For all his suave image, Clark Gable had a cowboy's appetite. His favorite dish was chili con carne, thick and spicy, the way he remembered it from his boyhood in Ohio. According to his longtime cook, Lillian Rogers, Gable liked his chili made with coarse ground beef, kidney beans, onions, and just enough heat to make you sweat. When filming kept him on location, she'd send jars of it along, packed in ice with his initials marked on top. Studio publicity from the 1930s even leaned into it, describing Gable as a man who prefers chili to caviar. He often invited the crew to share a bowl after long shooting days, served with saltines and a cold beer, laughing that it tastes better when you're tired. During the holidays, he'd have it simmering on the stove while friends gathered at his ranch in Encino, the aroma mixing with cigar smoke and laughter. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, a dish that belonged to a man who, beneath the tuxedos and lights, still loved the taste of home. Katharine Hepburn, brownies. Katharine Hepburn's brownie recipe became nearly as famous as her Oscar speeches. It appeared in Ladies' Home Journal in the 1970s, written in her no-nonsense tone. "Never mind the flour, it's the butter and chocolate that count." Her version used barely any flour at all, resulting in a dense, fudgy texture that could ruin you for any boxed mix forever. Friends say she made them often for visitors at her Connecticut home, always cutting them in rough squares. Never perfect. Her longtime housekeeper, Nora, kept the pantry stocked with baker's chocolate and walnuts, just in case Miss Hepburn got the notion. Guests remembered the smell of melting chocolate drifting from the kitchen as Hepburn stomped around in jeans and old tennis shoes, quoting Shakespeare and tasting from the pan. She once told a journalist, "If I can make you smile with a brownie, I've done my job." That was Katharine. Sharp, funny, unapologetically real. In an industry obsessed with polish, she served her desserts the way she lived her life. Rich, imperfect, and completely unforgettable. Frank Sinatra, veal Milanese. Frank Sinatra's taste in food was as refined as his music. His favorite meal was veal Milanese, thinly pounded cutlets breaded, fried, and served with lemon, a dish he learned to love from his mother Dolly, who ran a small Italian restaurant in Hoboken. According to his personal chef, Jimmy Fradiano, Sinatra demanded it cooked exactly her way, crisp on the outside, tender inside, and never overdone. During his Rat Pack years, he'd host elaborate dinners at his Palm Springs home where chefs worked in shifts, but Frank often wandered into the kitchen himself to check the oil temperature. He paired his veal with a glass of red wine and Sinatra Select whiskey on the side. Dean Martin would joke that Frank's only superstition was never let anyone else salt his Milanese. Even on the road, he made sure hotel kitchens could prepare it to spec, once flying in breadcrumbs from New Jersey when the local ones tasted like cardboard. For Sinatra, food was family, ritual, and roots. Long after the spotlight faded, that golden veal cutlet stayed his comfort song. Simple, precise, and deeply his own. Grace Kelly. Quiche Lorraine. Before she was Princess Grace of Monaco, Grace Kelly was known in Hollywood for her poise, precision, and her love of classic French food. Her favorite dish, according to Palace archives and old studio interviews, was quiche Lorraine, a savory pie of eggs, cream, and smoky bacon. Grace first tasted it in Paris while filming To Catch a Thief, and reportedly learned to make it herself under the guidance of her family's cook, Mary McKenna, back in Philadelphia. After marrying Prince Rainier, she kept the tradition alive in Monaco, where the royal kitchen staff prepared it for her Sunday luncheons. She insisted on simple ingredients, no onions, always Gruyere cheese, and a butter crust chilled overnight. Friends remembered her laughing with the cooks, apron tied over her couture dress, saying, "If it falls apart, we'll call it rustic." The dish became her signature comfort food, a taste of her American roots wrapped in European elegance. In a world obsessed with perfection, Grace's quiche stood for quiet confidence, proof that even a princess found joy in a flaky crust and a well-timed laugh. Doris Day, chicken, and dumplings. For all her glamour, Doris Day never drifted far from Midwestern comfort. Born in Cincinnati, she grew up on hearty, homespun cooking, and her favorite meal, chicken and dumplings, never left her table, even in her California years. According to her autobiography, Doris Day, her own story, she learned the recipe from her mother, Alma, who made it every Sunday. When Doris bought her ranch in Carmel, she often cooked it herself with help from her longtime housekeeper, Agnes. The smell of simmering chicken broth, parsley, and fluffy drop dumplings became a kind of trademark around the ranch. Visitors recalled walking in to find Doris stirring a pot with her hair tied back, a small dog at her feet, and big band music playing in the background. She called it her happiness food. Though she could dine anywhere she pleased, she preferred to feed friends in her own kitchen, insisting that nothing fancy tastes as good as food you can share. The world saw Doris Day as America's sweetheart. Her friends remembered her best as the woman who served chicken and dumplings with laughter and second helpings. Humphrey Bogart, navy bean soup. Humphrey Bogart may have played tough guys on screen, but in private, his comfort food was as humble as it gets. Navy bean soup. His wife, Lauren Bacall, often told stories of Bogey slurping it late at night, sleeves rolled up, his gravelly laugh echoing through their Holmby Hills home. The recipe came from his childhood cook in New York, a woman named Mamie, who taught him that the secret was salt pork and patience. During filming, he often requested it from studio caterers, though none made it quite like Mamie did. According to Bacall's memoir, he liked it so thick you could stand a spoon in it. On cold nights, he'd pour himself a whiskey, sit by the fire, and eat straight from the bowl. No pretense, no silver spoon. Navy bean soup wasn't about show. It was about comfort for a man who spent his life pretending to be someone else. Long after the lights dimmed, Bogey's kitchen smelled of beans, smoke, and quiet satisfaction. Proof that even the hardest men are softened by a bowl of home. Bette Davis, Boston baked beans. Her favorite dish was pure New England practicality, Boston baked beans. Born in Lowell, Massachusetts, she grew up on the hearty regional staple, cooked low and slow in molasses, salt pork, and a touch of mustard. Even after fame carried her to Hollywood, she kept the tradition alive. Her cook, Mabel Dillingham, once told Photoplay magazine that Miss Davis insisted the beans be baked overnight in her old brown stoneware pot. On holidays, she paired them with brown bread and crisp apple slices, like my mother used to do. Guests at her home in the 1940s remembered her bustling into the kitchen between takes, lifting the lid to check the bubbles herself. She claimed it helped her think. The aroma of sweet molasses and pork filled the air while she ran lines or practiced that famous stare. In a world of champagne and caviar, Bette's baked beans were a defiant nod to her Yankee roots. Simple, slow, and impossible to rush. Dean Martin, pasta fagioli. Dean Martin, the king of cool, might have been all tuxedos and cocktails on stage, but at home, he was just Dino, the Italian kid from Steubenville who loved his mother's pasta fagioli. His longtime housekeeper, Louisa, once told a reporter that Dean would come home after a late show and ask, "Got any fazool left?" Using the slang his family grew up with, the dish was peasant food, ditalini pasta, cannellini beans, olive oil, and garlic simmered into something comforting and rich. Dean preferred it with a splash of Chianti and a hunk of bread, usually eaten at the kitchen counter while humming Sinatra tunes. Frank used to tease him, saying, "Dino, you're the only guy I know who can make beans look classy." But that was Dean's secret. He never pretended to be anything he wasn't. Holidays at his Beverly Hills home meant big pots of pasta fagioli, laughter echoing through the house, and a crooner's soundtrack on the record player. For all the glamour and glitz, it was this simple, steamy bowl that kept Dean Martin grounded. Lucille Ball, apple pie. Lucille Ball could command a studio, a set, and a kitchen. Her favorite dessert, a classic apple pie, was famous among her family and friends. According to her daughter Lucy Arnaz, Lucy loved baking and often rolled dough herself in her Beverly Hills kitchen, even after long filming days. Her cook, Harriet, would peel the apples while Lucy mixed butter and sugar with the same intensity she brought to a punchline. The recipe came from her mother, Dee Dee, who taught her that a perfect pie crust takes a calm heart. On holidays, Lucy filled the house with the smell of cinnamon and laughter, always joking that her pies looked better than they sliced. Studio guests remembered the big red Pyrex dish she used every Thanksgiving, and how she'd insist everyone take leftovers for the commute home. It was simple comfort, the same way she approached life, heartfelt, a little messy, and full of warmth. For all her fame, Lucy's apple pie reminded everyone that joy doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be shared. Cary Grant, roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. Cary Grant might have looked like the definition of sophistication, but the man from Bristol never lost his love for a proper English Sunday dinner. His favorite meal was roast beef with Yorkshire pudding, a ritual that reminded him of home. According to his longtime butler, George Hutton, Grant would plan his holiday menus weeks ahead, ensuring the roast came from the best butcher in Beverly Hills. He liked it medium rare, carved thin, and served with hot gravy poured from a silver boat. The Yorkshire pudding, puffed and golden, was always baked by his cook, Edna, who guarded the recipe like a state secret. Dinner guests like Alfred Hitchcock and Grace Kelly often joined him for these lavish meals, though Cary himself preferred quiet evenings with family. He'd light candles, pour a scotch, and slice the roast himself, saying it kept him in touch with simpler things. Even at the height of Hollywood luxury, he stayed loyal to that humble British tradition. Proof that Cary Grant's real charm wasn't in his tuxedo, but at his table. Judy Garland. Chicken soup. Judy Garland's favorite dish was as tender as her voice. Homemade chicken soup, simmered with love and a touch of longing. Her daughter, Liza Minnelli, once said Judy called it her rescue food, the thing that steadied her no matter what was happening. The recipe came from her mother, Ethel, who'd add carrots, celery, and parsley, and let it simmer all afternoon until the broth turned golden. Judy's longtime housekeeper, Jean Peavy, kept the kitchen stocked for it year-round, knowing that if Judy came home weary from a show, that's what she'd ask for. She'd sip it slowly, often wrapped in a robe, humming softly between bites. Friends recalled the scent of broth filling her Brentwood kitchen on cold nights, a mix of home and heartbreak. She once told a reporter, "Chicken soup fixes everything, at least for a while." It was simple, soulful, and just like Judy herself, full of warmth, with a little ache underneath. Every spoonful carried the comfort she gave the world, poured back into her own weary heart. Rock Hudson, meatloaf. Rock Hudson was the image of Hollywood's leading man, but at home, he was just a Midwestern boy who loved meatloaf. Born Roy Scherer in Illinois, he grew up on his mother's simple recipes, and that taste of home never left him. His personal chef, Jack Rowe, said Rock's favorite meal was a classic meatloaf made with ground beef, breadcrumbs, and ketchup glaze. Nothing fancy, just hearty and honest. During the holidays, he'd invite close friends over, pour drinks, and laugh that nobody needs caviar when there's meatloaf. He liked it served with mashed potatoes and green beans, the same way his mother made it back in Winnetka. Even at the height of fame, with Rolls Royces in the driveway and fans at the gate, Rock took comfort in ordinary food that didn't ask him to perform. The smell of baking meatloaf, rich and savory, grounded him in a world that rarely was. For a man who played every kind of hero, this humble dish was the one place he could finally just be himself. Elizabeth Taylor, chicken stew with wine. Elizabeth Taylor's life was all diamonds and drama, but her favorite dish had neither. It was a rustic chicken stew with wine. The recipe came from her friend and occasional chef Wolfgang Puck, though she'd first discovered it while filming Cleopatra in Rome. Liz loved rich flavors and insisted her stew be slow-cooked with onions, garlic, tomatoes, and a full bottle of red wine. None of that half-measure nonsense, she'd joke. Her longtime cook, Maggie Smith, said Liz liked to help stir, barefoot, wearing her jewels in a silk robe. The aroma filled her Bel Air home, mingling with the scent of gardenias she always kept nearby. Dinner guests included everyone from Richard Burton to Michael Jackson, and they all remembered the same thing. Liz at the head of the table, laughing, eyes sparkling, serving spoon in hand. For all her grandeur, that chicken stew revealed her truest self. Warm, indulgent, and just a little wild. Seasoned with the same passion that made her unforgettable. Joan Crawford, fried chicken. Joan Crawford's attention to detail didn't end at the camera lens. Her cookbooks and old letters show that she loved simple Southern-style fried chicken, perfectly seasoned, golden, and crisp. Her longtime housekeeper, Mamacita, Christina's nanny and confidant, handled most of the frying under Joan's watchful eye. Crawford insisted the chicken be soaked in buttermilk overnight and fried in cast iron, not an electric skillet. She kept a note pinned inside her pantry door. A lady knows her oil temperature. Friends said her kitchen smelled like heaven on Sundays, with Joan in an apron over silk slacks, tasting from the pan and declaring, "More salt." Despite her reputation for perfection, mealtime was relaxed. She'd pour bourbon for guests and tell stories from the MGM days. Fried chicken keeps people humble, she once told a reporter, and maybe it kept her grounded too. For all her elegance and control, her favorite dish was one that had to be made by hand, with grease on the stove and laughter in the room. Jimmy Stewart, homemade ice cream.
No one knows quite for sure who made the first quart of ice cream.
Jimmy Stewart's favorite indulgence wasn't fancy. It was homemade ice cream. Born in small-town Pennsylvania, he kept that boyish love for the simple things. After returning from service in World War II, he bought an old hand-cranked ice cream freezer and used it every summer, often during family holidays. His wife, Gloria, recalled in interviews that Jim would make everyone take turns cranking, no exceptions. His go-to flavor was vanilla with crushed peppermint, served right from the churn into paper bowls on their Beverly Hills patio. During Christmas, he'd mix in bits of candy cane and pour warm chocolate syrup over the top, whistling "It's a Wonderful Life" under his breath. Their housekeeper, Minnie, often started the ice and salt early, so the mixture would be ready before dinner. When the kids were grown, he still made it, more slowly, more quietly, but always with the same sense of joy. It's not about dessert, he'd tell friends. It's about people doing something together. That old ice cream maker still sits in the Stewart family kitchen, a relic of sweetness that never melted away. Bing Crosby, turkey a la king.
Oh, you the new butler?
Well, it's been a long time since I've been the new anything.
What's happened to Hudson?
Bing Crosby's Christmases were legendary, but his favorite meal wasn't glamorous. It was turkey a la king. The dish became a holiday ritual after big family dinners when leftovers filled the icebox. According to his cook, Helen Scott, Bing would ask for it every year without fail. She'd shred the turkey and fold it into a creamy sauce with mushrooms, green peppers, and a splash of sherry, served over toast points or puff pastry. Bing would hum White Christmas as the sauce thickened. often sneaking a taste with a wooden spoon. Guests like Bob Hope and Rosemary Clooney remembered it being served in the cozy den, not the dining room. Bing liked food that made people stay a while, Hope said. Even after world tours and private jets, Crosby kept his kitchen old-fashioned, with casseroles bubbling and big bowls of mashed potatoes. For a man whose voice defined the holidays, it's fitting that his favorite dish was warm, familiar, and meant to be shared long after the feast was over. Lana Turner, crab meat casserole. Lana Turner's life was all glamour, diamonds, scandal, and a film career that defined an era, but her favorite dish came from the California coast, crab meat casserole. She learned it from her personal chef, Elise O'Donnell, during her Malibu years in the 1950s. Elise baked it with fresh Dungeness crab, cream, breadcrumbs, and sherry, a recipe she'd picked up from an old San Francisco cookbook. Lana called it her quiet luxury meal, the kind she made only for family or close friends. She'd set the table with gold-rimmed china, candles, and soft music, then laugh when the casserole bubbled over the sides. "That's how you know it's good," she'd say, waving away the smoke. The dish became her signature comfort food, elegant but unpretentious, rich without being fussy. It reminded her of summers by the ocean, when she could just be Lana, not the sweater girl. In a life full of spotlight, this simple, savory casserole was one of the few things she never shared with the press, just the people she trusted most. Mae West, steak and potatoes. Mae West was never one for subtlety, and her food choices fit the same bill. Her favorite dinner was steak and potatoes, heavy, hearty, and cooked exactly her way. Her longtime chef, Otto, recalled that she preferred a thick T-bone seared in butter and garlic, served with baked potatoes the size of your fist. Mae dined late, often around midnight after her shows, sitting in her pink satin kitchen with a martini glass nearby. She'd joke, "I like my men rare and my steak medium." Even in her 70s, she kept to that ritual: steak, potatoes, and laughter. She believed indulgence was a kind of power, and her meals reflected that. Reporters who dined with her said her table always gleamed with silver and roses, yet the food was pure Americana, no frills. For Mae, good cooking was like a good performance, bold, satisfying, and a little dangerous. Her steak dinners were as legendary as her one-liners, proof that some appetites, once awakened, never fade. Behind the gowns and the camera flashes, the stars of old Hollywood weren't so different from us. They found comfort in the same small rituals: a pot simmering on the stove, the smell of butter in a warm kitchen, the laughter that fills a room before grace is said. For a few quiet moments, even the most famous faces in the world were just people at the table, reaching for second helpings and telling stories between bites. Those dishes, the stews, the casseroles, the pies, were their link to something real, something lasting. And in a way, maybe that's what keeps them alive for us too. Every recipe was a love letter to home, written in butter and memory. If you felt that spark of nostalgia, give this video a little hype. It helps more folks find their way back to these forgotten moments in time. And maybe tonight, you'll cook something simple, light a candle, and raise a glass to the legends who proved that the brightest stars still shine best around the dinner table.